Good morning, everybody. My name is Sandra Lombana Lindquist, and I'm the President and CEO of the New Orleans Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining us today for a joint webinar with our friends at the City of New Orleans and our Chamber colleagues. On the screen, you can see an agenda for the morning. First, we will hear from Riza Petrie, Chairwoman of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Louisiana, who will introduce our keynote speaker, Julien Meyer. Our friends at the New Orleans Regional Black Chamber of Commerce, John Renthrop, will moderate the Q&A session directly after the presentation. Please submit any questions via the chat option in your Zoom screen. And lastly, Andrea Romero, President of the Gulf South LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce, will close the hour for us. So let's go ahead and get the webinar started, and I will turn it over to Riza.
Thank you so much, Sandra. We are so happy to join this webinar. One of the missions here at the Hispanic Chamber is to connect our members with opportunities. So we're looking forward to sharing this important information on how to do business with the City of New Orleans. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker, Julien Meyer, Chief Procurement Officer with Office of Procurement, Bureau of Purchasing for the City of New Orleans. Julien is a French-trained lawyer who came to live in New Orleans in 2005. He joined the City Attorney's Office in 2012 as a member of the Contracts Group. In 2018, he became the Chief Procurement Officer and head of the Bureau of Purchasing for the City of New Orleans. Julien directs a team of 14 staff members who assist 30+ city departments in purchasing goods and services. Mr. Meyer, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you very much, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today to do a presentation that I've been doing for a couple of years now, and so I'm really looking forward to be with you today. So let me start. All right. So anyway, introducing you to doing business with the city. Here's the content of the presentation that you can see on the screen right now. I'll go over some preliminary notes. I won't reintroduce myself, but at least leave you with my contact information and talk to you about also the contact information of my team. And then we'll go through 3 parts. Part 1 being the registration with the supplier portal, as well as updating your account, because I want to take into account the fact that I may have attendees who have never registered with us yet, and some others who have done already. So I want to take that into account in my presentation. Part 2 is about bidding opportunities, help you understand where to get information and what you're looking at. And finally, part 3 will be a city payment process, which you want to know as well as part of the introduction. It's critical to know what's at the end of the tunnel of getting an opportunity with the city. We'll have a quick conclusion and then question and answers. I'll be happy to answer any question that I can, and if I cannot, I will make sure to follow up with you. So let's go through the preliminary notes, which is just a brief introduction of my office. So as part of the Bureau of Purchasing, with a centralized authority to assist the 13+ departments who purchase many goods and services. As you've heard from Ms. Petrie, I have a staff of 14 people that assist in those tasks, whether it's the actual process of purchasing goods and services, but also compliance. And we have also added a piece since the launch of our new financial system, which is a vendor support. Now, you've heard about myself, so I won't repeat it, obviously, but this is my email address. And on the website of the Bureau of Purchasing, you could find more contact information as to my team. And especially 2/3 of my team consists of buyers or purchasing agents. And on the website, under who we are, you will see what department they assist. So in the event that you have any question regarding contract, a purchase order, bidding opportunities, you will see which department they assist, and you can reach out to them in order to submit your questions. While they may not have the answers, the same as myself, we'll do our best to locate either where to find the answer or who to contact to get you that information. So let's start with part 1, is about the registration of the supplier portal and updating your supplier account. So what is BRAS? BRAS is an acronym for Budget Requisition and Accounting System Services System. The city launched this new BRAS in July of 2019. Prior to that, the city had a combination of 5 financial system, different system who handle different pieces between grant funding and city funding. And we made the leap into the 20th century or 21st century with a new financial system that helped us capture all the different aspects of the procurement to payment processes. So what are the features of the supplier portal? Well, first off, and let me stop for a second. The supplier portal is the external interface of BRAS system, meaning that we have obviously an internal piece platform that all departments are using, but the supplier portal that I'm going to talk about to you is the external interface, which is where you either gather some information about opportunities or you access to create your account. So first off, it's free. I mean, obviously, we don't charge you for looking at every bid opportunities that we post on the supplier portal. You don't have to register to locate them and to look at the details. You would have to register if you want to use the system, for example, to respond to an opportunity or to submit an invoice, and I'll address that a little bit later. But this is a platform that's on the cloud, so it's accessible 24/7. Obviously, as any new technology, we have faced some issues with connection, and sometimes internet can prevent you from accessing it. But it has been a blessing for the city to have this tool in the cloud, especially when we were faced with a cyber attack back in 2020, because we were able to reactivate our process pretty quickly. As soon as we were able to find out with the vendor that our data was secure, that we had no breach, we were able to get back on track and use the system to track our transaction, purchase order, and contracts. So this is a supplier portal that allows you, once you register and become a supplier, to have access to additional information where when you get to an opportunity that's being listed, you have the ability to use your account to submit a response to that opportunity. This is also a tool that would help you, and I can talk about that later on. If you enter your banking information, you'll be able to use the ACH feature of the system to be paid. As anybody who has done business with the city prior to BRAS, we used to issue checks, which were sent in the mail to the vendors once the transaction was completed, which has obviously been a challenge during the pandemic. The service is being interrupted. And so even before the pandemic, we promoted the use of ACH to be able to get your payment directly to your bank. So how do you register? So you have a principal way to do it is by going onto the City of New Orleans website at www.nola.gov, which will bring you to the landing page of the City of New Orleans. And you will see there's a menu in there that have information about contracts, bids and contracts, and that's you will see a link to the supply portal. Once you click on that link, so again, www.nola.gov, go under bids and contracts, you'll see the link for the supply portal BRAS. Click on that link, it will bring you to that cloud platform, the supply portal, with the landing page that gives you some basic information, introduction about the city and about the bidding opportunities. But there's also a link, a space on the webpage where you can click on register. So registering with the supply portal is a process that takes about 5 minutes. It's very quick. As for basic information that are going to be critical, especially login and password. And I'll remind you that in the next page, because that is, as you may have faced, and I face that myself on a daily basis with all the separate accounts that I have, whether it's Facebook or LinkedIn or others. I struggle sometimes of maintaining my password, remembering my password. Please don't judge me. I know there are other people like me also, so I feel good about sharing that with you. But it is critical to maintain your password for accessing the supplier portal, because as every other system, if you forget it, you can reset it. But again, sometimes there could be some technology challenges where maybe internet is down and you won't be able to get the email notification back that your account has been reset. You may have to reach to our online supplier assistance form to ask for help to reset your password. But it's critical, like everything else, to keep your login password in a place that you can use. Also, if when you create an account for yourself, if you, we sometimes recommend to use the email address. That could be an email address that's connected to several accounts, because if it's the email address of a specific person, that person leaves your organization, you would have to reset it completely. And that's sometimes one of the frustration that our suppliers are facing, is somebody creating the account in the past is not there anymore and they use their email address. So one tip is to use maybe a generic email address that's connected to many different accounts. That could help. But at the same time, understand also the control process in organization where you prefer to have, or your IT department is asking you to have a specific person, specific email address connected to that. But it's a 5-minute process that asking you basic information about your company. We do ask whether you're DBE or not certified, or if you fall within other categories of small businesses. We ask you if you're a 1099 vendor as well. There's information that we capture on our end to track, especially at the end of the year, if we have to issue any notifications to those 1099 vendors. Ask you to also let us know what company codes you're choosing. And this is why I'm going to go to the next bullet, which is why it's so important, the company codes. Well, the city of New Orleans used the company codes from a company, an organization called NIGP, which is a national procurement organization that has put those criteria for products in a very lengthy way. But that's what we use for 2 reasons. One is for all the opportunities that we release on the supplier portal, they are connected to a company code. So for example, if my office is buying paper clips and is looking to issue a solicitation, paper clips do have a company code that we would select when we release the event, because by selecting that company code, it's going to pull all the suppliers who have chosen that company codes to be notified of that event. So under the company code for paper clips, it's going to list all the name, email addresses of the individuals who have registered and chose that company code because they sell that product most likely. And they will receive the notification from when we release the event to any changes that we make to that solicitation in the course of its opening until it's awarded or canceled. So this is not necessarily easy to choose the right one because there are so many. We do recommend to select the broader category. It always start with like a number. It says 5-digit codes, and the first digit the category, and we always kind of recommend to use the main one. So you can that would mean that anything that's selected under that category, you would get a notification. But it's really important for that reason. And so the other reason is that we try to assess the number of suppliers registered per company codes to see where we have a lot or we don't have enough. But we also recognize that some vendors have selected randomly sometimes company codes and they get notification for products that they don't sell at all. So we try also to, I would say, clean up the record by making sure the vendor is unselected the company codes they don't need, because we don't obviously want to burden your mailbox with notification that are useless because you don't sell that product. But it's critical to choose one. You obviously have the ability to reach out to those buyers that I mentioned before. If you're new to do business with the city, you can reach out to them. And for the department that you're interested to do business, asking them like, in the past, what company codes your department has used for certain products. That's something that I encourage my buyers to release that information to suppliers who are interested in doing business with the city, because you obviously don't know that information ahead of time. That's why also we're changing a notice of advertisement to include the committee codes on the paper in the official journal, so you know which committee codes are connected to that event. So we know we have a lot of work to do with committee codes, and we try to help you as much as we can. We know that colleagues from the Office of Supply Diversity use NEX and ICS as codes for registration of vendors. So we try to connect the dots as well with those codes in the future, so that it makes sense to you. What do I need to update? Well, like I said, if somebody from your organization leaves, you need to update your account as soon as possible, because like I said, if you create a supplier account today and you select the committee code for opportunities that you're interested in, and then next week you leave, whatever reason, that you didn't provide information to your company as to what was email address or password, well, that person, you're gonna keep getting those emails, those notifications from the system. That won't go to anybody else in your office except that person. But I also want to bring it up that you have the ability, when you create your supplier account, to have a primary contact and then secondary contacts. The difference is the primary contact is the person that manages the account for your organization. So if whatever your organization is, whoever is going to be there is going to be maintaining all the primary information, such as banking, for example, ACH process. So recommendation for us is to tell you to get somebody most likely at executive level, or may have some decision. It could be the CFO typically, somebody who deals with the financials because of the bank information to enter, the payment, tracking the payments. That's mainly the person you would want to be able to set up as primary contact. But we encourage you to do secondary contact if you have a sales representative or several ones. One may be dealing with specific type of bids. The other one is dealing with RFPs, or that we have one person that's dedicated to seek business opportunities. They can create a secondary contact as well. They would get notification. They would get access to respond to events, but they may not need to have access to the bank information. They may not need to control that. So primary versus secondary contact is and why, I guess by the what and the why, I mixed it up a little bit. So if you have somebody who's leaving, if your bank information change, for whatever reason, if you change bank for your ACH, you need to update your account to do that, because it will go to whichever information you provide to us. We, on our end, have access to some information, but we do not touch it without your approval. So if there's any issue with the account, that you reach out to us, we will most likely ask for confirmation writing by anybody that has a management position, to make sure that we have the right paperwork to do any changes if needed. And we won't touch your account. This is yours. You manage it. We're here to assist you in using it, but we won't touch it. So those are the basic questions that I wanted to answer on this. But remember, keep your login password somewhere that you can have access to. Don't lose it. Share it, or maybe use a generic email address that everybody can use, but still share that email address, that password. Point of contact, think about between your primary, secondary, and others. You can create really many secondary contacts. Depends on your size of your organization, what they do. Like I said, contact information, email and mailing addresses, make sure it's correct. Back to my first slide, if your organization changed location, you're no longer in New Orleans, but you in Metairie, you got to update that, especially if you get checks and not ACH payment. We will use the mailing address that you have in your account. Bank information, I'll talk about that a little bit later, but this is a great tool that we are pushing, sometimes even requiring our suppliers to have that, especially if we have contracts with those suppliers. it's really critical to have that piece because it's less paper for everybody, less headaches. Hopefully, it's still a better process than the checks, but we understand also there could be some issues, especially if the bank information were not updated, may go to the wrong account or may not go through. If you cancel your account at the bank, you change it, may not go through at all, so we have to track it down. And most of the dates that you do where we have some actions on our end, whether it's purchasing, accounting, or treasury, it may take about 7 to 10 business days. So for example, if you change some of your contact information as a supplier, but you became a vendor, and I'll explain to you what that means later on, we may have to also update your vendor profile, but that's internal function, but we still have to go through that process. So let me go to part 2 now, bidding opportunities. Basic question that are listed on this slide. So how does the city buy goods and services? So we use 4 methods of procurement. 3 are commonly known, I would say. The 4th one, I'm going to spend a little bit more time on that one because it's new. So request for proposal and request for qualifications, RFP, RFQ, are the method of procurement we use for a selection of professional services, whether it's a lawyer, business consultant, an architect, medical doctors, or things like that. ITB, invitation to bid, is the method of procurement that we use for construction, for goods and material and supplies, as well as what we call non-professional services. The basic example that I give is janitorial services, security services are considered non-professional, and part charter, we have to follow the sealed bid process, the invitation to bid, and the acronym is ITB. Those RFP, RFQ, ITB are the most common method that we use. The last one, the 4th one, is ITQ. It's an invitation to quote. This is a process that we launched back in 2019 to replace the prior process, which was typically departments had the ability to make calls, emails, faxes. The word is still there, even though I don't know who uses faxes anymore, but maybe. This was the process that the department used for informal purchases. Informal means that it's under a threshold, a dollar threshold that the city has established, and say under that threshold, if your budget or the amount of your purchase is under it, you can go through an informal process. So we move that phone calls, emails to a bidding opportunity through BRAS. So it's kind of like an ITB, an RFP, meaning that we purchasing create an event that we post on the supplier portal. We have a document that's called an invitation to quote, which is typically a 2/3 page document that gives you a little bit of the steps on how to respond and what this is about. Contains obviously the description of what the department is looking to purchase, and is asking you to submit a quote, because we do not select anybody without a supporting document that tells us that your offer is, your proposal is valid and legal. So we always look for this supporting document that tells us this is what my offer is. And this is an informal process. So typically we put those ITQ for 5 business days. This is also a process where we select the lowest bidder, unless, and that's the part of the informality of this process, unless the department has a reason to go to the next one. An example could be that the lowest bidder has submitted a quote, a valid quote, but they cannot deliver the product by the date the department needs it. And the second lowest bidder, while maybe above the lowest, obviously, can match that date. And that could be a justification for the department to go and select the second. Also, golden rule for purchasing is to get 3 quotes. I don't know if and when you do any repairs at your house, whether you go for 3 quotes or not, but that's a golden rule that the city is that we do our best to get 3 quotes, because we believe that when you get 3 proposals, you have it gives you a good chance to know if there's a range, or are you totally off what you are asking. Is there any elements that you didn't think of that are pushing the price high? But typically when they're close to each other, that's a good indication that department has provided the necessary information, and they found out that they have find the right price. Now, if we don't get 3 quotes, we typically cancel that event and do it again. That's our objective, is getting 3 quotes. So I know it's been frustrating for some vendors who have not understand why, they didn't get it the first time and it's put it back out again. But we're not we're not trying to how could I say play with those processes. We are just trying to make sure we get the best proposal for the city and make sure that everybody has an opportunity. Because if you get less than 3 quotes, it may mean that we didn't reach out to any the correct number of suppliers. It might be additional suppliers who missed it, who didn't see it. We may have used a committee code that it's not effective for this ITQ. So there are other reasons. We're not trying to manipulate the process. We're just trying to make sure that everybody had an opportunity, because the number 3, especially for informal processes, is the number that as typically is by other agency and by law sometimes looked at the number, the magic number for this process, informal process. So the ITQ. I talked a little bit about the characteristic of this ITQ, but it's informal, 5 business days. We'll look for a quote that's being attached to your response in a system. We'll look for electronic response. We don't offer the ability to submit it in hands at our office or via emails. But obviously, if you have any difficulty with that process, the ITQ document contains the contact information of the buyer in charge of that process. So you can reach out to that person to say, hey, I've got technical difficulty. I'm unable to submit it. Can I email it to you? But you just have to make sure you get the approval from the buyer before doing that, because we're pushing our vendors to use the system to submit their proposal, their quotes. For the RFP and RFQ, I mean, they're pretty similar, but the main difference, at least from an RFP and RFQ, the RFQ is used typically for selection of architects and engineers. It's a request for qualification. By law, we cannot select them because of the price. We have to select them on their qualification. But the RFQ can be used also in some more complex processes where we want to maybe do a 2-step process. We want to qualify firm first and then go back to that short list or pool of qualified firm to ask for more specific, by going through potentially an RFP process. The RFP process, it's always asking for cost in addition to technical criteria. So cost is a component as well as other criteria that are typically about experience of your team, experience of your firm, what other projects have you done in the past that you can highlight in your response. There could be some more specific request depending on the project, but typically experience of your firm, whatever project have you done. Obviously, the DBA program is applicable to those processes of RFP and RFQ because the threshold is $15,000 for the DBA program to apply. So it's and the goal is 35%. It's a default goal that is rarely changed by the Office of Supply Diversity, which would change it only because of specific circumstances, but I don't have an example to bring to you. But that is part of the requirements for any RFP, RFQ, and ITB as well. And the RFP and RFQ also, we've restructured the form of those documents to increase the transparency about the process, especially what happens after an evaluation, after selection. What is the contract administration routing process? We try to streamline also the list of requirements that we ask you to submit, because there's one thing that we definitely hate to do is to reject you because you forgot a form or you didn't check a form. I can assure you we take no pleasure in rejecting bidders at all. And sometimes we pull our hair as well as to what could be the result of that rejection. We recognize it could be our own forms as well. So there's a constant work on our end as to look at our templates, listen from vendors who have experienced an issue, and see how we can make them better. The ITB, the invitation to bid, is a little bit different from the others, and the main difference is that in the sealed bid process, we don't have much room, almost no room for errors from our end and from your end as well, because whatever we put in that document is the law of that procurement, of that process, and we cannot touch anything. And so this is a document that needs a lot of scrutiny from you when you look at it, more than I would say that the RFP and RFQ, because anything that you don't do will be an opportunity for your competitor to point it out, to kick you out, and then we don't have really any margin of error for those. But it's structured differently. We're looking at changing that template as well, but it contains basically the front form are the main instructions of the procurement process. Attachment A would typically be the scope or the specification of the work that we're looking for. Attachment B would be the terms and condition that would apply to your contract from various laws, whether also it's the duration of the agreement. And then attachment C is typically where we ask you to fill out the form to put your price, your quote, your numbers. And that one is very critical to scrutinize as well, because again, a box that's not checked, a number that's not correct, could be the subject of a protest from another competitor that would ask us to deem you non responsive. But those ITB are used for, like I said, constructions, goods, materials, and non-professional services. A sealed bid, we have to go with the lowest bidder, unless it's not responsive or not responsible. But if that lowest bidder is responsible, then we need to award the contract to this vendor. We've also keep in mind that there could be challenges by the second lowest bidder. They could be also opportunity for the city to cancel the invitation to bid, because if we over budget, the city department did not budget enough. This is one of the causes why we cancel bids, and that's, for example, what we're experiencing right now with all the road projects that the Department of Public Works is releasing. I just want to highlight that to you all, so you know that supply chain issue, labor shortage issue, and some other aspects as well. The bonding also requirements have pushed prices very high, and so we are facing an issue with bids that come out too high for us, sometimes close to double the budget, and so that creates some issue obviously on our end, because we have to make sure we have the funding in place for this project, and some work needs to be done in readdressing our budget. But that is one of the reasons why we can cancel a bid. Again, we have to have a good reason for it, just cause, that's the law, and we make sure that we have that. Again, we do not take any pleasure to cancel a bid at all. May have some justification that we have to go through. So what you should look for in a solicitation, first off, I would say the contact information of your buyer. Whoever is listed on this document, find their contact information, because if you have any question, any issues, this is the person you need to talk to. Anybody else outside of that solicitation cannot talk to you while the solicitation is out, and what we call the cone of silence. So if, construction business, if you try to talk to an architect, or, you are trying to talk to a department director who was sponsored that invitation to bid or that RFP, or somebody in the city department that kind of handle that problem, you can't talk to them. you got to go through the purchasing agent, who is the person collecting the information. Why? It's not, the primary reason is because we consider that every question that's being asked should be answered and provided to everybody. Everybody should know what the issues could be, and they should be knowing what the answer is. So that's why we post all answers to questions via an addendum, as we call it, making sure that it's posted, but it's really critical to go through agent. Look at the deadlines, obviously, there's a second piece, all the important dates that are on it. Look at all the required submission. Don't forget a document. I'll go to that after. It's really critical as well. And then I would say also, just ask for what you don't see, meaning, for example, was there a contract prior to the solicitation? Who was the vendor who provided those services? Can you get a copy of that contract? Can you find out how much it was? That's critical to help you finding out what the city did before this contract, if it was already procured before, because that gives you an idea like how much the city paid before and how can you make a difference yourself. So the common mistakes are, you submit the form, but you forgot to check a box, or you forgot the form. The main one is submitted untimely. I mean, the system does not allow you, when you try to submit electronically, to do it after the deadline. If it says 3 o'clock, it closes at 3. There's no way you can submit it after. If you're allowed to submit by email, making sure that we received it before the deadline. It's not necessarily when you send it, is when we received it. Because that's the same thing as we do when you come to our office, you want to drop it off, we're going to stamp it. We're going to stamp your proposal with the date and time. And if it's even a minute after, again, we're not looking forward to returning to you and say you're not responsive because you need to do it timely. It's because others are going to say, I did everything I could to do it timely. Why this one who did it after the time would be allowed to come in? And now you may have some reason that you can bring to our attention. It could be, let's say you did a FedEx and they told you it was delivered and there was a signature and we don't have it. We'll have to locate it. If you have a proof and evidence to show us that you did everything you can to get it before, and there's evidence that show that it was there before, because I've seen that for once where they showed a proof of delivery via FedEx that was done before. We accepted it. We found it. It went to a different place, a different person, but we found it and we accepted it. But this is the most common mistake that people do, is like just bring at the last minute. But I know at the same time, sometimes you get your quotes at the last minute to be the most valid ones, and especially in this world where sometimes your subs do not give you a quote until really, I mean, they may give you a quote, they may say it's but tomorrow it'll be done. So you may have to do the last minute, but we just don't have room for accepting a proposal after. Tips to submit a successful bid or proposal. Well, do your homework. I mean, meaning, like I said, look at prior contracts, contact the buyer to see if you can get any additional information through public record request as well. Just make sure you read everything, but ask question. That's my main thing for you all. Ask question. Anything that doesn't make sense, that you don't understand, submit a question in writing so you can get an answer. Sometimes the challenge is we may not understand the question, so we may not get the answer you want, but you can obviously resubmit it a different way or try to find out why it was not answered correctly. But answering question is really critical. Those are reminders: good in services, professional, non-professionals, and construction. So that are main buckets of our purchases. Informal is the ITQ, formal process, RFP and RFQ. Type it twice. It should have been ITB. I'm sorry about that. I'll correct my slides. Formal, it's typically also out for 30 days with some pre-submittal conference in the middle. Low bid is how we approach goods and construction. So who is the lowest bidder? And typically then responsive and responsible. Best value is we evaluate the technical criteria, like I said, experience, qualification, but also the price. The price is a component of the evaluation, except for AE, where we typically go for qualification only. Then PO versus written contract. Most of the formal solicitation will end up in a written contract signed between the city and the selected vendor, while the informal process, the ITQ, will result in a purchase order. Doesn't necessarily need to be written in a contract. That's an additional layer, administrative layer in the process that's not required in there. So I'm sorry, I have a few minutes left. I'm gonna try to go to that part 3, city's payment process, and to talk to you about those main features. So as I said earlier, we use the ACH for all our payments. For all our formal solicitation, we required vendors to use and to implement, to update their supplier account with their bank information so we can pay their ACH. We want to get rid of the paper for this process. Obviously, payment terms are net 30 from the date of the invoice. One of the very positive aspect of our change is that we implement a system to be able to allow vendors to submit their invoice electronically. In the past, obviously, they would be submitted to a department. Department would then bring it to accounting, and accounting would have a check whether it's approved or not, back and forth before the check is issued. And now we want all our suppliers to submit their invoice electronically. So that's one of the reasons why you would have to have a supplier account to use it, because we do not take invoice manually. Now, there are some manual processes that exist, but are very exceptional basis. We want to be able to track your invoice. It's not just a matter of convenience. It's more about accountability, transparency. We want to know where it is, who has it, so we can figure out how long it takes, because it's not obviously fair to you who have provided the services or the goods to not knowing what's the process, what's going on, and people I don't know where it is, which sometimes has been the case with the prior process that was manual, where it could be sitting on a desk with that intent of sitting, but just be on a stack. So by doing electronically, we know for sure if the invoice has been submitted. Sometimes you may say I submitted it, but we'll see electronically that it's not, so we'll help you how to submit it so it works. But if it's submitted, then we can tell where it is. And working on some information to all the suppliers to explain the terminology and the supplier account that tells them what does that mean when it's released or unreleased. There's some information that we owe you all to find out what's going on with your invoices. But that is critical for us to use, because we want to make sure we know where all our invoices are. I talked about supplier vendor. I mentioned the word vendor before. So when you're new to the city and you register in the supplier portal, you are a supplier, somebody who has not done business with the city yet. Once we award whether a solicitation, a contract, a PO to you, you're going to become a vendor. A vendor is, on our end, a new profile that we create. You don't create that. We create that profile based on the supplier account profile you created. And that's a vendor file that we maintain that helps us obviously see the payments, to concentrate all information regarding that vendor. So you may work for different departments, but we can tell in your vendor profile how much you've been paid total. That's help us tracking all those transactions. But you only become a vendor, and that's the function that we do. You don't have to do anything once you do business with the city. I also want to mention the matching process to kind of explain a little bit. I'm eating the time that I've allowed it to discuss. I apologize about that, but I do want to make some points here about the matching process. So if you provide goods, if you deliver paper clips to the city, after I put an ITQ, I selected your company to provide the paper clips, you deliver them to my office. I'm good with it. I'm very happy with my paper clips. When you submit your invoice in a supplier portal and it comes to accounting electronically, the system is looking for that three-way match. The three-way match means that, do we have a purchase order for this purchase? Do we have a receiver, meaning did the department actually receive the goods? And third, obviously, is the invoice improve. And once those three elements are connected, then the payment is automatically released in the system. That's called a three-way match. And that's a typical process for purchases and approval and release of payment. If it's a service, so for example, you provided training to my office, a couple of days, you provide that service, and then you submit your invoice. I don't have to go in the system to say I received the training, but the invoice is going to come to me for approval, review and approval. And if I approve, then that's the two-way match that gives the green light for accounting to release the payment to you. So why do I need a purchase order, a contract to get paid? I mean, the obvious answer is to protect yourself. It is critical to have this document in hands. Even if you have a good relationship with a city department and you know the people and you know they want to do business with you, get that PO, that contract first. Do not provide goods and services before that being done. It's protection for both of us because I'm not supposed to get goods and services before I give you a valid authorization to do business with me. And you are going to be protected with that document that I owe you what we agreed to do. If you do it before a purchase order or contract, you may run the risk that this was not approved. It may not be approved by the director of that department, may not be approved by some other approvers at the city level, whether it's the fiscal manager. And you know, obviously somebody has told you to do it. So you could challenge that to say that they had the authority to do it, but a purchase order and a contract in the system is the golden key to get paid. Now, the other reason to have that is because the way our system works is, like I said, supplier portal is the external interface. We have an internal interface, BRAS, for all the departments. The PO and the contract creates a link between those two areas. Without the link, you cannot submit an invoice. So, for example, if you know, put an ITQ for paper clips again. Sorry for use that example over and over, but let's say you're the lowest bidder, and I call you and say, "Cool, I need that next week. It's really critical that I need it. Can you place the order and deliver that? I will get the PO done." You do that, you deliver, you get the clips, and you haven't gotten the purchase order. Well, you deliver the goods to me, give you a verbal authorization to do it. But two problems obviously here is one, you don't know if I had the budget or the authority to do it. So that puts you at risk to not getting paid, or to have to go to court and sue me personally to get that, you know, payment. I'm going a little bit dark with that example. I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. But anyway, I have to talk to myself after this call. Anyway, the other reason is that you have your invoice. You're ready to submit your invoice to get paid. Well, because there's no PO contract, you can go to supply portal, but you won't find it. You will not see a purchase order. So you will have to wait until that purchase order is created to be able to submit that invoice. And then you can go obviously to the CFO, to the CEO, the mayor's office, say, I need my invoice to be paid. But first question in finance that we're going to ask is that, where's your PO? I mean, did you get a PO? Do you have a contract? And then that's going to show that you accepted to do the work without this document that is critical to do business in those two ways, two reasons that I explained. So really, I mean, I do want to emphasize as to you all, I do not provide services or goods without the purchase order or the contract first. It's really critical. The common mistakes about submitting invoice is that typically look for one invoice at a time when you submit it. So if you group them, it's going to be rejected. Your invoice doesn't have a date, doesn't have the PO number or contract number. Obviously, if the invoice does not match the purchase order or the contract. So that's why it's also critical to talk with your department to make sure they understand how you're going to bill them for the goods and services that has to match the PO or the contract they issued. So if the PO that I issue for paperclip just say one line paperclips, but then your invoice says paperclips red 10, paperclips blue 10, etc., it's not going to match that PO line. So it's going to be difficult when you're going to try to submit your invoice. It's going to be like, my invoice has 3 lines, but your PO has 1 line. How do I do this? So critical to talk to your department. And so I think I'm running out of money, not time, not money. But there's probably a lot of question. But tips is just talk to your department. Make sure you have a line of communication with them so they know what to expect in terms of the invoice. You know you're getting a PO and contract, a timeline that matches all the requirements, condition that you have, that they have. Stay in touch with them. If the person is not there anymore, reach out to the director to find out who is your new contact. Because on the buyer side, they will typically help you, but they'll also typically get to the department and say, what's going on with this purchase order? Who is the point of contact? Because my buyers kind of process the documentation, but they not necessarily have a full knowledge of the transaction. So that could be a frustrating step for you all. I mean, to contact my buyer who's going to tell you, well, let me reach out to the department, or have you talked to the department, because they cannot do anything to that purchase order contract unless there's conversation between the vendor and the department. So stay very much in touch with them. And I mean, how do I submit an invoice? Is basically when you go to a supplier account, if you know your purchase order, your contract, when you go under order management, there's a specific section in your account, you will find all the POs that have been created for you to be able to submit that invoice against that purchase order. It is that link that tells you, hey, now I can submit my invoice that's going to go then to accounting. So I'm going to go to reminders. Like I said, the link between the supplier portal and BRAS. Net 30 is date of the invoice. So when you submit your invoice through the supply account, it asks for the date of your invoice. That's the date that the system is going to take into account when it's fully approved to release payment within 30 days of that date. So obviously, if it was an old invoice, it will release the payment in the next check payment run, which we typically have on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That's the check runs. But if you've done your work, and let's say it's May 17, the date of your invoice is going to release payment on June 17. One single document. Don't try to submit several invoices; they'll be rejected. And again, with the ACH now, once you get paid, you get also remittance advice via an email as well. So has been very useful for grant-funded organization who have to keep track of the payment that they received. So in conclusion, I hope that I prepare you to understand the registration process, bidding opportunities as well, and the payment process, and to submit an invoice. Though I know I've been pretty fast at the end, so I apologize about that. But we've done a 3-day presentation that is on the Bureau of Purchasing website. Each day was an hour and a half, an hour of presentation with 30 minutes of Q&A. Each presentation had a component of purchasing, supply diversity, but also accounting if needed for the third payment. So I encourage you to get more details through those presentations. I posted on our website. Especially I went very fast on the payment process, but that was day number 3 of our presentation. So I encourage you to look at the presentation to get additional information. One more thing. So with hurricane season coming up, obviously, we're going to develop for the 3rd year in a row an emergency resource directory. I encourage you all to register in the supply portal, because that's the primary source that we use to get all the email address of all our suppliers. And we basically ask you during the hurricane season, what type of goods and services can you provide to us? So it asks you like cots, baby diapers, anything that the city has identified as a need. And what we do is that I develop a directory of companies who have said they can provide one or more of those goods or anything else that's not listed. And then when we get into an emergency declaration, emergency season, we use that directory to contact you. So like, hey, the city needs a quote for this product, the services you were listed there as a provider. Can you provide an email us a quote? And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're gonna get the work, but because we have to do still a due diligence of getting the lowest bidder as much as possible. And that's a due diligence that we have to do, but it also it's a moving target. Sometimes we may need it right away and then pause, and we may need later. But we used that during Hurricane Ida, and so we're going to launch that again. There'll be a survey sent to suppliers register in the supplier portal. So be on the lookout for that. So that's why I encourage you to register in the supplier portal. And that is it with my presentation. I apologize for going over the time.
All right, Mr. Julien Meyer, that was pretty extensive. It was great and concise. I know we got a short amount of time for Q&A. We do have a question that states, what goods and services are most frequently sourced for the City of New Orleans departments?
Thank you for the question, and thank you, John, for relaying that question to me. I mean, the primary one is office supplies. We used to have a city contract for the supplies in the past, and we have the ability to use state contracts, but it goes from paper, not paper clips, but paper, copy printer, paper, all the pens, folders. I mean, we did one for my office earlier this year, I believe, for different supplies that we need. I mean, something that we look to do an office supplies bid for the entire city, but it's difficult because the a wide range of supplies that we use, and try to identify the ones that we need to do that require a little bit more research on our end, which the system is helping us to do that. But definitely office supplies, I would say, from pens, tabs, paper clips. Obviously, recently it's been a lot about cleaning products, Clorox and things like that. Even more with the pandemic has really increased a need for that. So those are the main purchases, and I'm trying to pull a report from 2021 on how the city did all their purchases to share that with the business community, show how much we spend and in what categories. So I don't have a timeline as to when it's going to be produced, but we pull the data, we try to put it together in a way that's accessible for everybody.
And one last question. How often is the supplier portal updated with bid procurement opportunities?
So it's impossible to say because it really depends on the department. While our office assists 30+ department to purchase goods and services, they are the driver of the needs, and so there's no answer to that. However, what we're working on is a procurement forecast survey that we want to post on the supply portal, which departments would feed that forecast 30 to more days in advance of putting out the ITQ, ITB, or RFP and RFQ, so that it gives those suppliers the opportunity to know what's coming at least in 30 days. That's what we're working on. And I think for as we learn better through the system and our departments have purchased things, we're trying to look at developing some information for next year in advance of 2023 to see what's coming next year. But it's not a routine task. Even when some contracts are in place, they could be terminated, or department could decide to terminate or to let it expire to put it out. But I believe that procurement forecast information that we're working on and putting a supply portal will help you at least knowing at least 30 days in advance what's coming out, because we know it's been a challenge for you all to know when is it out or who is doing it, and so we're trying to bridge that gap with that information. But routine wise, I mean, obviously, I would leave you with that last information. Our fiscal year, as you all know, probably is from January to December. So once department have a budget approved at the end of November, December, that's when they start thinking about creating their purchase order or contract for next year. But if you are looking for specific goods and services, if you know there's a contract in place, again, it's part of the research where you can get a copy of that contract to see when it expires, and that expiration date you can calculate maybe 3 months before. If the department is not renewing that contract or is the last extension, they should start their process about 3 months before to get a new contract in place. So that's another tool that you can use if you look at a specific contract, obviously.
Okay, thank you, Julian. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. If you all have any other further questions, please submit it to jpmeyer@nola.gov. I'll hand it back to Sandra. Thank you all.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Julian. Actually, I'm going to turn it over to Andrea, who will close out the webinar for us.
Julian, thank you. What thorough introduction and overview of the city's programs that could affect and really help all of our members. So thank you to Julien Meyer for hosting this event. What a fabulous platform to be helping all of our members. Thank you to the Hispanic Chamber of Louisiana, the Regional Black Chamber of Commerce as well. I'm Andrea Romero with the LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce. And I know what's exciting to me is sharing a platform that enforces our mission of promoting an inclusive business environment, society where all individuals and businesses have equal rights and opportunities for success. And so on that note, thank you to everybody for participating, for hosting, and let's go out there and have some success with our members. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your morning.
Thank you. Have a great day.